Please join me in welcoming Dr. Phyllis Olmstead. Hello, Dr. Olmstead. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
It's such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
May I call you Dr. O?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. That is her affectionate name, so I feel close to her. I feel like I've known her just about all of my life. So, Dr. O, tell us a little bit about your life and how you became to be a publisher.
A very long story. Used to be you'd get a gold watch from being in one place for 40 years or something. I started on a farm from a very natural life on a dairy farm with a ranch and cattle and horses and everything like that, and studied agriculture, had a passion for agriculture. Then when you go into higher education, you end up having to publish or perish, as they say. And so immediately I was involved in writing and speaking and flying abroad and becoming involved in that. When I went to work at a university in South Florida, Nova Southeastern University, the dean at the time, he asked me to help him write a CD, electronic book, CD, on how to start a private or charter school. And so we wrote that CD together with his son, Doctor, and his wife, Doctor.
Wow.
And another doctor who had been like a lifelong friend. And so the four of us wrote it and published the CD. I did the electronics on it, and we had our company there. And after that, I moved back to Central Florida, left the university, and started another company, Olmstead Publishing, to produce some other books.
Wow. So this was not necessarily a passion that you knew that you wanted to write when you were 7 years old.
Well, I did. I did a lot of writing. I still have some of those writings
Oh,
from when
you
I was
do?
a child.
Oh, wow.
I come across them frequently. I went to a Catholic school to begin with through 8th grade, except for 1 year, and then public school, and I love to write. I was in public speaking, in 4-H and in FFA, and you had to write for that. You had to research for that. And reading, the one thing I tell all my authors is the best way to become a great writer is to read great works and to read voraciously. And I can actually envision what's going on in the book in my mind. And I think that if you can do that to your readers, then you have become a great writer.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a piece of good advice. You know, I'm a little bit embarrassed to even say that I've heard the word publisher just about all my life, but to tell the honest truth, I don't really know that I know what a publisher actually does. But because you are an instructor and a teacher, I know that you won't take the pencil and smack my hands for that. Can you tell me, what is a publisher? What does a publisher do?
It's changed a lot. With technology, publishing has changed. I never even met Jo Hamilton, the author for The Love of Scott, until 2 days ago. We've totally published her book. Her book's been out there. She's had book signings. I produced posters for her, bookmarks, business cards, but I'd never met her. And we had birthed this book together and cried together over it and the content and edited it together. A publisher can be many different forms now. It used to be this big, big building in New York City where all these people took your material. You'd get 1.5% to 3.5% returns on it. When you'd get the book back, it may not look anything at all like what you started. My first book that I co-edited and co-wrote was I Make a Difference, Making the Transition from Clinician to Educator by Delmar Books. And they chose the cover, they renamed it, they edited the content, They even misspelled my name on the cover after getting it right to begin with.
Oh.
And we proofed it, and then when they reprint it, they reset the cover.
The cover, yeah.
And so that changed it. With how I'm a publisher now, people come to me, I think it's a spiritual kind of thing that they find me, and then if I'm enthralled in their book, I read about 20 pages into Joe's copy, and I fell in love with it. I had so many connections with it. I felt it was an important book that needed to be published, and I agreed. And 6 months later, it was birthed. In the past, when my book came out, it took 2.5, 3 years to finish. Wow. I've had one book that within 2 weeks of delivering me the first material, it was out. And that's because of technology, the changes in how media is handled, and one-up production as opposed to mass production. Right. You used to have to, either a publishing company had to build and write and publish and print the book and then distribute it, and you didn't have a real tight connection on that. I do what's called cafeteria style publishing, in that Joe could have paid somebody else to edit it. Joe could have had it typeset by somebody, but she typeset it herself. We had a friend of hers edit it. She had another friend edit it from Canada, and I worked on it all throughout the time. She had her sister-in-law take the pictures on the cover in Iowa of those cornfields and that sky, so that they would feel at home, because that is where they came from. Right. And she had the book cover basically designed by a neighbor. Right. And then I did the fine-tuning on it. I did the fine-tuning and the layout on the interior of the book. And everything is cafeteria planned with me, so that I'm not taking the whole thing away from the author, choosing the name, those types of things. I might make a recommendation if they don't have something solid in their heart that they want to do. Right. But each one of the people I have helped, they've known what they've wanted. Okay. They've had a passion for it. It was their story, and I was just helping deliver that story, and putting it out there electronically and in paper. Right.
How long have you been in the publishing business?
Well, the first CD and publishing company, Rock Ed Tech Publishing, that I worked with the Goldmans and Dr. Champagne, was in 1996-97. And then about 2006, I believe, is when I opened up Olmstead Publishing.
Right. Well, I know you've done a lot of international type things, global things. Can you speak a little bit about that? I'm excited about that.
Well, actually, I'm on my way to Thailand right now for a Rotary International Conference, which is what these buttons are about. My first international lecture off of the continent was in Bangkok, so I'm kind of coming full circle here. And I spoke on distance education and technology and education. I went to Costa Rica to lecture 2 years, and with the university, and that was on distance education also. My doctorate is in curriculum and instruction, so that is the basis of it, how teachers use technology in the classroom. And to explain distance education is the teacher's end of it. Distance learning is the student end. And so that's why I'm using the term distance education instead of distance learning. It's my dissemination of education either synchronously or asynchronously, either at the same time as a student through video, compressed video, freeze frame video, or audio. And then you have asynchronous technologies, which is like computer classes, correspondence classes, mailing tapes, mailing books and written material. That's asynchronous distance education.
And that is geared towards the teacher?
Well, that at my level, I was teaching teachers and teaching doctoral students, but all of this education can be used at any level.
Okay, very good.
In fact, I started distance education teaching hospital homebound children in Orange County, Florida.
Wow.
I
Tell me
worked
a
with
little bit
them.
about that. These were children.
These were children, mainly middle school and high school students who were homebound, maybe due to cancer, pregnancy, heart transplant, diabetes, asthma, fibromyalgia, or they were disciplinary problems and deemed to be have a special need, therefore homebound. And I would either teach them over the computer, over freeze-frame video, audio classes, and if you've never experienced teaching, it's with a class of 14-year-olds in their homes with you on the telephone teaching them algebra over the phone.
Oh my. No blackboard?
No blackboard. No computer screen. And it was a phenomenal experience. And that proves to be the teacher. If you can explain something and have them learn it on the other end without them seeing you or seeing it, that's education.
I would always say that's a miracle.
Especially
and teenagers,
boys.
I was going to say teenagers and boys, yes. What kind of books do you publish? I know that there are some publishers who will only work with you know, certain type of books, and then there are others who, you know, whatever you bring, they will work with.
Every one of the books I've published with this publishing company are books that I've looked at and decided had a spiritual, emotional, or social need. Right. The first one with this publishing company was Mark Johnson, the editor, brought it to me, and he brought together 11 authors, and he named the book Multiple Streams of Success, Real Life Stories of Faith, Hope, and overcoming adversity. And that book brought together 11 people, some with pornography addictions, cocaine addictions. He had had a gun held to his head when he was a teenager and the trigger pulled and it misfired. All of these people coming out of that adversity, total poorness, not a dollar, and driving down the interstate and nearly running out of gas, and money come floating from the sky. Each of these authors had different events happen in their lives that were severe. And from that, another story came out, is that in that book was an article by Reverend Dr. Isaac Dees. And he was working at the federal penitentiary in Coleman with Mark Johnson, who was staff there. And he wrote a chapter in there about him having a couple of master's degrees, a doctorate degree, working for the Department of Justice with juveniles, and having a cocaine addiction at the same time. And losing everything, losing his ancestral property that he had received, losing his brand new home he built, his beautiful wife, his family. He lost everything and was living on the streets after he lost his job. And this talks about, he added a chapter by his mother, by his niece, by his sister, by his friends that went through it with him, by his friends now, explaining how he came out of that, was saved from that, and that's called Don't Let Go.
That sounds like a book that I'd want to get. I'd
yes,
want to read that.
It's exciting.
Wow.
From that, he was also a chaplain at hospice in Lake County, and a woman was going through the last 3.5 years of her mother's life. Eva was the mother, and the daughter was Dodie, Doreen Cox. And Dodie wrote the story of the last 3.5 years of caring for her mother, including a section on hospice. And she had journaled this, and it wasn't a book. She had journaled, just wrote prolifically during this time. And she heard about this chaplain that had just published a book, and she wanted to read it. So she met Dr. Dees through hospice, and she ended up meeting me. We took her 800 pages.
800?
Yes, and compressed it down to about 350. Then, from that, we ended up reducing the font to get it into about 280. So normally I publish in much larger font, but we needed to get as much of her story out as possible, and she did remove a lot. Her good friend from the FBI in Washington, D.C., was no other than Joe Hamilton. Joe Hamilton had written the book, read the book that Dodie had written.
Right.
And so Joe was finally kicked by Scott after tripping upon the movie Chasing Zero.
Right.
So she called me up and said, I've got Dodie's book here, you're the publisher, can you help me? I said, well, first you got to get it in written form. So a friend of hers gave her a computer for Christmas. So I'm talking her through getting going on that, and she's experimenting with the computer and learning how to use it. And then come September of last year, I called her up on the phone, said, can you get Mom and Dad on a conference call? She says, yeah, what's wrong? And I says, is it possible to get Mom and Dad on a conference call? She says, sure. She got him on a conference call, and I says, Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton, Joe, Scott, and Joe just published their book, and it happened to be Scott's birthday.
Oh, wow. Did you know that at the time?
I realized it as I called them.
As you called them,
that it was Scott's birthday.
Yeah.
And they had always hoped that it would be published on that date, and I had hit the button to publish it and get the first copy printed that night. Oh. And so it was just, I still get chills. I actually have chills running through me thinking of the fact that Scott finished that book on his, what would have been his 51st birthday.
Right, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. That was, actually I was gonna move into about For the Love of Scott and how you met Joe, and one of the things she had told me, and you kind of alluded to this, her book, I think she said was like 350 pages, and it's ended up being like 170. And I just said, how is 170
Well, it
something?
depends on the font, 173 total.
Yeah, right.
It depends on the font, it depends on redundancy. Sometimes things have to be pulled out. I don't think we pulled much out. I added photos, and in almost all of my books there are a number of photos in them, real photos from their life. And that's what's in hers, is a lot of that. There really wasn't much pulled out. It's just once you recrop the pages and change the margins and change the font, it ends up changing the size of the book.
But my question was going to be, do you get authors sometimes that really, kind of pull back, or, I mean, they get really frustrated that you're not using everything that they give you?
They give me their material. If I need to tweak something, I get them to agree to it. I try not to ever change the flavor of an author. And I had one author who spoke in basically Ebonics.
Right.
It was dictated to his daughter, who typed it on onion skin on a typewriter 2 years ago. Then I had to type it up, and then I had to put it into standard English.
Right.
So that case, yes, they were very happy with that.
That's good.
That I took his sermon, his final sermon, 80 years old, and published it for him in a way in which multiple peoples would be able to accept and understand it.
Right. Has he been your oldest author?
Yes.
The 80-year-old? And what has been your youngest author?
Well, I have one that I'm working with now that was actually born in Russia, was in a Russian orphanage, the ones where they say they swaddled the babies and they laid there all day without being touched. Oh, and they had medical illnesses and stuff. She was abandoned by her family, or let go by her family, and she just recently went back and met them for the first time. Her mother was dead. She's, I believe, 21, and I've had my first meeting with her and the woman who's going to do her editing that I set them up with.
When Joe first approached you about her work, what did you think when you started reading those first 20 pages? Did you know right off that this was something?
Within minutes.
You wanted to do?
I think that I have like a seventh sense, not just a sixth sense. And I was talking out front with some of the friends of Sal, the producer, and I have a very good sense of people. And I'm able to say, I even have people come to me and say, what do you think about this person? Do you think I should do business with them? And I'm in the business world also. Besides the publishing company, I have a brick and mortar business. And they usually followed my advice. I work with a lot of charities besides Rotary, and people will call and ask me to come participate on their planning stages and ask me who they should and shouldn't approach.
Right. You're spot on.
And that's usually what they tell me. And so I had this, even just talking to her on the phone and feeling her voice, I felt a connection with Jo. And then when I started reading it, finding Scott's connections to me, he was only born a few days after me. Oh, wow. And his first car was identical to the one my first boyfriend had.
The Chevy?
At the same time, yes.
Chevy, yeah.
And same color and everything.
Really?
And I was born and raised on a farm, and he was born and raised on a farm.
Yeah.
I used to have to go and sit through a lot of my brother's baseball games, you know.
Oh, wow.
And I had a health incident in my early years, and he did, and you'll read that in the book.
Okay.
Yes. So I had a birth defect that had to be taken care of. And I've had multiple illnesses since then, and that's another reason I'm so involved in the program that we have going on with the TMIT, is that I have a passion for medical mistakes.
Right.
And no matter how vigilant you are, they can still happen.
They can still happen. Now, tell us a little bit about the summit that's going on now in the district. Is it TMIT?
TMIT is running
TMIT.
it.
And it's it's international?
Yes, it was going out all day.
Okay.
All over the world.
And what did you learn from it? Were you pleasantly surprised?
Yes,
or did you think it was?
I was. I feel that what they've got going on there is incredible. I met people that would line up really well with Jody Cox. They are caregivers. One has been a caregiver for 16 years, of first her father, then her mother through Alzheimer's. And I was really impressed with something I do for some of my authors, is I produce them book bags and shirts with their cover on it, which is their story.
Oh, that's nice.
And so there was a woman there, Regina Holiday, that was painting. And then I looked around and saw the Dr. Denham, and he had on a business suit that had a painting on the back of it, a real acrylic painting. And then I saw someone sitting 2 chairs over, and they had this acrylic painting, a different acrylic painting on the back of their jacket. And one was a leather jacket, could have been $300 jacket with this painting on it. And this lady in the back was painting on a canvas, she was painting what she was hearing throughout the day.
Amazing.
She's running safetyleaders.org, and she has the walking mural of their stories, and that's going to be in the 3rd documentary coming out. It's going to include all of everybody's stories. If you become a part of one of her foundations, you send in a jacket, she'll paint your story and send it back to you.
How cool
is that? You can't buy the jacket, but you have to be willing to attend at least 2 conferences wearing the jacket. And I says, we wear our shirts and jackets every day with these things on it, with our stories on them. So I would be more than glad to wear that at least twice a year.
Oh yeah, how cool is that?
Yeah.
That is really
neat. And in Florida,
neat.
we got to wear shirts. We can't wear jackets. So.
Right. So do you think the summit is definitely raising the awareness or the level of consciousness of
doctors
people,
and people? Mainly, their first goal is to go after changing the system. Right. Because and one board of director there said that when a death occurred, a situation happened, that it was her fault. It wasn't the staff's fault. The nurse that administered the drug that caused the problem, the reaction, the death, whatever it wasn't that nurse's fault. They shouldn't be rung up. It was the system's fault.
Yeah.
And in the case of Joe's brother Scott, that's exactly what it was. The pharmacist made a mistake. The clerk that filled the order with that made a mistake, didn't notice the pharmacist's error, and then every nurse and doctor, all 15 people that cared for Scott and handled that bag and checked it each shift, never caught the error. So it was totally systemic.
That, you know, every time I think about that, it just blows my mind. I just don't even understand how something like that could have happened with that many professional people involved in it. And it just wrenches your heart. How can people get in contact with you?
Olmstead publishing.com, or you can write Olmstead Publishing at USA.com, and then on Facebook, Olmstead Publishing on Facebook.
Dr. O, as a publisher, is it critical, or maybe it doesn't even matter, about your personal feelings when you get a hold of something that really excites you? Is there a point that you have to separate your personal feelings from the work that you have to do to get this book to print?
I guess I don't understand how to take the question, because I am emotional about every one of the books I've produced.
Okay.
I don't accept a book I don't understand or comprehend or don't have a passion for. And the whole drive, I have limited physical capabilities and limited energy. And therefore, if I didn't have the passion to talk this person through producing their book, because I'm not doing the labor on it. They've done the labor.
They've done the work.
And all I'm doing is pushing the button to get it produced. And so therefore, if I didn't have a passion for it, I wouldn't be able to give them that guidance.
You would not be able to give them that guidance. So you do have a passion for everything that crosses your desk.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. What kind of advice could you give to, and I know we have to wrap it up, we just have a little bit of time left, but if you could give one piece of advice to a budding author, what would that be?
Read, read, read. Read good works and study how it's written.
Thank you so much. You've been wonderful. And I'm hoping that we can have you come back, because I didn't get to ask nearly as many questions as I had intended to. Are you willing to come back?
I will try. Or you can come down to sunny Florida and have a vacation.
Oh, that sounds good. I like that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Perspectives in Focus. Bye-bye.